In the quiet neighborhoods of Bolingbrook, Illinois, Drew Peterson was once the kind of man people waved to as he drove by in his patrol car. He was a husband, a father, and a respected police sergeant, a figure of authority and trust. But behind closed doors, a different Peterson existed, one whose charm masked a pattern of control, manipulation, and eventually, murder. Peterson's story is not just another true crime tale. It is a disturbing reminder that the people we look to for protection can sometimes be the ones we should fear most. His case gripped the nation, not just because of the shocking details, but because of the unsettling idea that a decorated officer, sworn to uphold the law, could so easily break it. The murder of his third wife, Kathleen Savio, and the mysterious disappearance of his fourth wife, Stacy Peterson, transformed him from a trusted cop to one of the most infamous figures in modern crime history. Kathleen Savio's death in 2004 was originally ruled an accident, a tragic but explainable event. It wasn't until Stacy Peterson vanished 3 years later that investigators took another look and realized that Kathleen's death was far from accidental. Suddenly, the friendly neighborhood officer was at the center of a murder investigation, and the nation watched in morbid fascination as a small-town scandal unraveled into a case of domestic horror. What makes Peterson's story especially haunting is how ordinary it all seemed, until it wasn't. His life was built on the illusion of normalcy, and for years he got away with it. He laughed in interviews, mocked reporters, and basked in the attention of his own notoriety. But beneath the arrogance lay the undeniable truth. His badge had not made him an agent of justice, but a shield for his darkest impulses. Today, his name serves as both a cautionary tale and a legal precedent. The so-called Drew's Law, which allowed hearsay evidence in homicide cases, emerged from his trial and forever changed how courts handle cases involving silenced victims. Yet, despite his conviction, one question remains unanswered. Where is Stacy Peterson? The world may never know, but one thing is certain. Drew Peterson's legacy is one of betrayal, violence, and the chilling reality that sometimes the people meant to protect us are the ones we should fear the most. In the heart of suburban Bolingbrook, Illinois, on a crisp winter day in January 1954, Drew Walter Peterson was born into a world that promised both familiarity and opportunity. The small-town charm of Bolingbrook, nestled on the outskirts of Chicago, would shape his formative years, instilling in him a sense of community and the importance of belonging. As a child growing up amid tree-lined streets and neighborhood baseball games, Drew's early life was defined by the simplicity of suburban existence. Yet even then, hints of his inner drive began to emerge. From his earliest days, Drew was a product of his environment. Bolingbrook's quiet residential streets and close-knit community instilled in him values of hard work and perseverance. At Willowbrook High School, he discovered a passion for athletics. Running cross-country became more than just a school sport. It was an expression of his relentless determination. The early mornings spent pounding the pavement not only built his physical stamina, but also forged an inner discipline that would later be both his strength and, paradoxically, the foundation for the darker chapters of his life. Following high school, the call of duty resonated with Drew. He briefly served in the United States Army, a chapter that added a layer of rigor and structure to his life. In the disciplined corridors of military training, particularly during his time as a trainee for military police in Falls Church, Virginia, Drew absorbed lessons on order, hierarchy, and the importance of upholding the law. This period was transformative, as it further honed the qualities of resilience and authority that would become synonymous with his later persona. The military not only provided him with technical skills in law enforcement, but also reinforced the belief in a clear-cut right and wrong, a belief that would be tragically undermined in the years to follow. In 1977, Drew Peterson returned to his hometown with a newfound sense of purpose, joining the Bolingbrook police force. His entrance into law enforcement was marked by the promise of serving and protecting the community that had raised him. With every patrol, he reinforced the image of the dependable neighborhood cop, a figure who patrolled familiar streets, offered a reassuring smile to residents, and responded promptly to crises. As he quickly ascended through the ranks, Drew's career was punctuated by assignments that tested his mettle. He worked in specialized units, including a notable stint in the drug unit, where his role as an undercover officer required him to adopt different identities and navigate the treacherous underbelly of illicit activity. This period of his career was characterized by both commendation and controversy. Drew earned recognition for his dedication and resourcefulness, often praised for his ability to blend seamlessly into dangerous environments while gathering critical intelligence. The very traits that enabled him to succeed as an undercover operative, charisma, adaptability, and an uncanny ability to deceive, would later cast a long shadow over his public persona. Drew's long tenure in law enforcement, which had once been a source of pride and community trust, eventually became the very stage upon which his fall from grace was set. His disciplined exterior and reputation for valor were irreparably tarnished as his private life spiraled into a narrative of betrayal and calculated violence. In retrospect, the early years of Drew Peterson's life and career present a striking portrait of a man who was, in many ways, the embodiment of normalcy and dedication. Yet beneath the surface of that outwardly respectable image, the seeds of a duality were sown, a duality that would later force the community and the nation to confront the unsettling truth that sometimes the people we trust to protect us are the very ones capable of our deepest betrayals. Drew Peterson's personal life was a maze of relationships that at first glance appeared as ordinary marital ups and downs, but soon revealed a darker, more insidious pattern. His marriages, each with its own troubled narrative, would later become the cornerstone of a true crime saga that not only captivated public attention, but also painted a vivid portrait of a man whose private world was riddled with control, abuse, and tragedy. Drew's journey into marital life began with his union with Carol Brown. This early marriage, though relatively short-lived, set the stage for the complexities to come. Carol and Drew's relationship ultimately ended in divorce, a painful but formative chapter that hinted at underlying issues. While details from this period are sparse, the dissolution of his first marriage marked the beginning of a pattern, one where personal relationships would become battlegrounds for power and control. In 1982, Drew entered into his second marriage with Victoria Connolly. At the time, the union promised stability and a fresh start, but it would soon unravel under the weight of Drew's increasingly controlling behavior. Reports that surfaced later revealed a troubling dynamic. Drew's need for dominance extended beyond just dictating household routines. His controlling nature seeped into every facet of the relationship, affecting not only Victoria, but also her daughter from a previous relationship. Conflicts grew more frequent, and the environment became increasingly toxic, a foretaste of the domestic disturbances that would later define much of his personal life. After his divorce from Connolly, Drew's life took another dramatic turn when he married Kathleen Savio. On the surface, the union appeared to offer hope. It was a chance for Drew to build a family, and indeed, the marriage produced 2 sons. However, beneath this semblance of normalcy, a storm was brewing. The marriage with Kathleen was consistently marked by domestic disturbances. Neighbors and friends would later recount instances of multiple police calls, a grim tally that painted a picture of a household fraught with tension and escalating conflict. Kathleen, a woman who once dreamt of a fresh start and had ambitions to become a nurse, became ensnared in a relationship where her pleas for help and her expressions of fear went largely unheeded. The disturbances were not isolated incidents. They formed a pattern that culminated in an event that would shock the nation. In 2004, Kathleen's life ended under suspicious circumstances. Her body, discovered in a bathtub under conditions that defied the initial explanation of an accident, sparked a homicide investigation that would later become the focal point of Drew Peterson's public downfall. Her death was not only a personal tragedy, it was the turning point that transformed the narrative of Peterson's life from one of domestic discord to that of cold-blooded murder. Even as the shadow of Kathleen's turbulent marriage loomed large, Drew's personal life took another fateful twist. While still married to Kathleen, Drew began an extramarital relationship with a much younger woman, Stacy Peterson. Their connection was immediate and intense, yet it was born out of betrayal. When Drew's divorce from Kathleen was finalized in 2003, his new relationship with Stacy was already well underway. The contrast between the relative normalcy of his earlier marriages and the enigmatic bond with Stacy could not have been starker. Stacy, who was significantly younger, brought with her a sense of hope and vitality that initially seemed to offer Drew a fresh start. However, the relationship was anything but conventional. The disappearance of Stacy in 2007 added an additional layer of mystery and controversy to Drew's already tainted personal life. Her sudden vanishing act raised countless questions that would intensify media scrutiny and deepen public suspicion. Unlike Kathleen's tragic death, Stacy's disappearance remains unresolved, leaving behind a void filled with unanswered questions and the perpetual uncertainty of her fate. Across each of these relationships, a common thread was unmistakable. Domestic disturbances and allegations of abuse were recurrent themes. Drew's personal life was characterized by a relentless cycle of control, manipulation, and violence. Reports of verbal abuse, confrontations, and even physical altercations surfaced time and again. Whether it was the early warning signs during his first marriage or the overt conflicts that plagued his second and third unions, the pattern was clear. Drew's need for dominance and his propensity for abusive behavior cast a long shadow over his marital relationships. These domestic issues were not mere footnotes in his personal history. They became central to the scrutiny that would later define his public and legal battles. They provided the critical backdrop against which the tragedy of Kathleen's death and the enigma of Stacy's disappearance were later measured. For those who observed the unfolding of his life, the warnings were there from the start, a series of red flags that, in hindsight, pointed unmistakably to the darkness lurking beneath his seemingly respectable exterior. Drew Peterson's personal life and marriages form a crucial chapter in the story of a man who managed to blur the line between the public persona of a dedicated law enforcement officer and the private reality of a man consumed by his darker impulses. Each marriage, with its unique blend of hope, conflict, and tragedy, contributed to a legacy that would eventually culminate in a high-profile criminal case, one that continues to be dissected by true crime aficionados and legal experts alike. The intimate details of his relationships serve as a chilling reminder that behind the facade of normalcy can lie a turbulent undercurrent, one capable of turning love and trust into tools of manipulation and ultimately instruments of destruction. The turning point in Drew Peterson's dark narrative came with the tragic and puzzling death of Kathleen Savio, his third wife, a case that would not only redefine his public image but also expose a labyrinth of investigative missteps, forensic surprises, and legislative reactions. In March 2004, the calm of a typical day at the Peterson family residence was shattered when Kathleen Savio's body was discovered in a bathtub. At first glance, the scene appeared to suggest an ordinary, if tragic, accident. The bathtub was curiously dry, yet Savio's hair remained wet, a detail that immediately raised suspicions among those familiar with the case. The initial autopsy report backed up the narrative of an accidental drowning. However, as whispers of inconsistency began to circulate, a second look was demanded. Independent forensic experts and a subsequent exhumation of Savio's body revealed a much more disturbing story. The renewed investigation uncovered telltale signs of a violent struggle. Extensive bruising on her body and a significant gash along her scalp pointed to a scenario that could not be reconciled with a simple slip or accidental fall. These findings transformed what was once dismissed as an unfortunate mishap into a potential homicide, a realization that sent shockwaves through both the local community and the broader public. The case took on even greater significance in the wake of another personal tragedy, the disappearance of Peterson's fourth wife, Stacy. Her sudden and unexplained vanishing in October 2007 prompted law enforcement to reopen the investigation into Kathleen Savio's death. As new evidence and witness testimonies emerged, the legal system was forced to grapple with inconsistencies in the original investigation. Amid mounting pressure, the Illinois legislature enacted what would later be colloquially known as Drew's Law. This legal innovation was designed to address the challenges posed by the absence of direct witness testimony. Under this law, prosecutors were allowed to admit hearsay statements from unavailable witnesses, namely the voices of Kathleen Savio and Stacy Peterson, who could no longer take the stand. These statements, often the only remnants of what these women had conveyed before their untimely disappearances or deaths, became pivotal pieces of evidence in building the prosecution's case. In effect, Drew's law ensured that the silenced voices could still speak, even if only indirectly, to help uncover the truth behind a sequence of events that had long been shrouded in mystery. While the death of Kathleen Savio provided a grim conclusion to one chapter, the disappearance of Stacy Peterson opened another, equally unsettling one. Reported missing in October 2007, Stacy's vanishing was as baffling as it was disturbing. Unlike Savio's death, which could eventually be tied to concrete forensic evidence, Stacy's disappearance remains an unresolved mystery. No body was ever found, and despite extensive investigations and search efforts, her whereabouts continued to elude law enforcement. The absence of Stacy not only deepened public suspicion about Drew Peterson's character and activities, but also cast a long, dark shadow over the entire case. Although Peterson was never charged directly in connection with her disappearance, the unresolved nature of her case became a continual source of controversy and speculation. Investigators and true crime enthusiasts alike have pointed to Stacy's case as the missing piece in understanding Peterson's full pattern of behavior. A pattern that might reveal how a man with a respected career could orchestrate such deeply personal betrayals. Together, the homicide of Kathleen Savio and the enigmatic disappearance of Stacy Peterson form the crux of a narrative that has fascinated and horrified the public for years. On one hand, Kathleen's body, found in a dry bathtub with wet hair, battered by signs of struggle, provided tangible evidence that something far more sinister than an accident had occurred. On the other hand, Stacy's unresolved disappearance added a layer of perpetual uncertainty to the case, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. Every forensic test, every new piece of evidence, and every witness testimony further complicated the picture of Drew Peterson, a man whose once celebrated career in law enforcement now stood in stark contrast to the grim realities of his private life. The investigative process was fraught with challenges: the original mishandling of evidence, delayed exhumations, and a legal system scrambling to adapt to the unprecedented circumstances through legislative change. In the end, the dual tragedies encapsulated by Kathleen Savio's death and Stacy Peterson's disappearance forced the nation to confront a difficult truth: that sometimes the people entrusted to protect society can harbor the darkest of secrets. The case not only redefined Drew Peterson's legacy, but also left an indelible mark on the true crime genre, a constant reminder that in the quiet corners of suburban America, horror can sometimes be hidden behind the most unassuming facades. The courtroom became the stage where Drew Peterson's carefully constructed facade finally began to crumble. What followed was a legal saga that not only gripped the nation, but also forced a re-examination of how evidence is gathered, interpreted, and presented in high-profile criminal cases. In 2009, after years of simmering suspicion and renewed investigative efforts sparked by the disappearance of his fourth wife, Stacy Peterson, a Will County grand jury indicted Drew Peterson for the murder of his third wife, Kathleen Savio. The indictment was built not on an abundance of direct physical evidence, but on a mosaic of circumstantial details, a series of inconsistencies in his alibis, troubling witness statements, and the lingering doubts raised by Savio's puzzling death. The prosecution's case leaned heavily on this tapestry of circumstantial and, crucially, hearsay evidence. This evidence was made admissible under a controversial legislative change dubbed Drew's Law, which allowed statements from unavailable witnesses, like Savio and Stacy, to be considered in court. This legal innovation was as much a part of the story as the evidence itself, signaling a shift in how the justice system could deal with cases where key witnesses could no longer testify. After a trial that unfolded with relentless media scrutiny and intense public debate, the jury delivered its verdict on September 6, 2012. In a decision that sent shockwaves throughout the community, Drew Peterson was found guilty of premeditated murder. The evidence, once dismissed as circumstantial, had coalesced into a damning narrative that could no longer be ignored. By February 2013, the sentence was handed down, 38 years in prison for the murder of Kathleen Savio. This sentence was not just a punishment for a single act of violence. It was a public declaration that a man who had once worn the badge of honor had irrevocably betrayed the trust of those he was meant to protect. The legal drama did not end with the conviction for Savio's murder. On February 9, 2015, further charges were levied against Peterson, this time for a chilling plot that would have extended his reign of terror even from behind bars. He was accused of orchestrating a murder-for-hire scheme aimed at killing Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow, a move that underscored the lengths to which he would go to evade accountability. The case progressed rapidly. On May 31, 2016, Peterson was convicted on these charges, and by July of that same year, he was sentenced to an additional 40 years in prison. The murder-for-hire conviction compounded his already staggering sentence, reinforcing the narrative of a man who was not only capable of cold-blooded murder, but also of plotting further acts of violence. The legal drama did not end with the conviction for Savio's murder. On February 9, 2015, further charges were levied against Peterson, this time for a chilling plot that would have extended his reign of terror even from behind bars. He was accused of orchestrating a murder-for-hire scheme aimed at killing Will County State's Attorney James Glasgow, a move that underscored the lengths to which he would go to evade accountability. The case progressed rapidly. On May 31, 2016, Peterson was convicted on these charges, and by July of that same year, he was sentenced to an additional 40 years in prison. The murder-for-hire conviction compounded his already staggering sentence, reinforcing the narrative of a man who was not only capable of cold-blooded murder, but also of plotting further acts of violence. A series of appeals and filed post-conviction relief petitions. His legal team argued issues ranging from procedural errors to claims of witness intimidation by prosecutors, a contention that added yet another layer of complexity to an already convoluted case. Despite these efforts, his appeals met with limited success. In September 2017, the Illinois Supreme Court upheld his conviction, affirming that the evidence presented during the trial, both the physical traces and the persuasive power of the hearsay testimony, was sufficient to sustain the guilty verdict. This judicial reaffirmation closed yet another chapter in a case that had already reshaped the landscape of true crime in America. The aftermath of the convictions has seen Drew Peterson's life confined not only by his prison sentence, but also by the measures taken to ensure public safety. Initially, he was incarcerated at the Menard Correctional Center in Illinois, a facility notorious for housing some of the state's most dangerous inmates. However, given the high-profile nature of his crimes and the security risks they posed, Peterson was subsequently transferred to the Federal Correctional Institution in Terre Haute, Indiana. In more recent years, for reasons of safety and to prevent any potential external influence, his exact location has been shrouded in secrecy. Filings have identified him at the Indiana State Prison in Michigan City, Indiana, though such details remain closely guarded. This deliberate obfuscation of his whereabouts serves as a stark reminder of the continuing threat he poses and the high level of vigilance required to contain someone whose criminal legacy still echoes in the halls of justice. The legal proceedings against Drew Peterson are a testament to the intricate dance between evidence, legislation, and public perception. From the controversial acceptance of hearsay evidence under Drew's law to the rapid succession of additional charges that painted an ever grimmer portrait of his activities, every step of the process has been meticulously documented and widely publicized. His convictions, both for the premeditated murder of Kathleen Savio and for the murder-for-hire plot, serve as a reminder that justice, though often delayed, can eventually prevail. Yet, the enduring legal battles and the continual adjustments to his incarceration status also illustrate the challenges inherent in prosecuting high-profile cases where the lines between personal tragedy and public outrage blur. Ultimately, the courtroom dramas, the appeals, and the legislative responses not only ensured that Drew Peterson would spend decades behind bars, but also left an indelible mark on the criminal justice system. His case forced a rethinking of how evidence is treated when victims can no longer speak, and it underscored the necessity of evolving legal standards to meet the grim realities of modern crime. For the nation, his trials remain a potent reminder that sometimes even the most trusted figures can harbor secrets dark enough to change lives and the law forever. The Drew Peterson saga exploded into the national consciousness the moment the details of his personal life and alleged crimes broke into the public sphere. The case combined elements that, on their own, might have been seen in any sensational headline: a respected ex-cop, tumultuous marriages, a suspicious death, and a disappearance that still defies explanation, into a narrative that both captivated and repulsed the American public. From the onset, the story of Drew Peterson was impossible to ignore. As news outlets began piecing together the timeline, a once-admired police sergeant now implicated in the death of his third wife, Kathleen Savio, and the vanishing of his fourth wife, Stacy Peterson, the media frenzy was inevitable. Major cable news channels, talk shows, and newspapers dove into the case, drawn by the dramatic contrast between Peterson's public image as a law enforcer and the grim details of his private life. Television anchors and pundits dissected every detail: the dry bathtub juxtaposed with Savio's still wet hair, the multiple police calls reporting domestic disturbances, and the eerie disappearance of Stacy that added another layer of mystery. This coverage transformed the case into a media spectacle, with every new development, whether it was an exhumation, a newly admitted hearsay statement under Drew's law, or a public outburst by Peterson, scrutinized and debated by viewers across the nation. The case's cultural footprint has been profound. Drew Peterson's story has transcended traditional news reporting to become a staple of true crime documentaries and TV movies. Productions such as Lifetime's Drew Peterson, Untouchable, and Investigation Discovery's documentaries have reimagined his narrative, often portraying him as the archetypal villain, a corrupt guardian whose betrayal of public trust shocked even those who had once admired him. Iconic actors, including Rob Lowe, have stepped into the role of Peterson in dramatized retellings, further cementing the case's status as a cultural phenomenon. Beyond dramatizations, the legal and media implications of his trial have left a lasting legacy. The enactment of Drew's law by the Illinois legislature was a direct response to the challenges posed by the case. This law, which allowed hearsay evidence from unavailable witnesses to be admitted in court, not only influenced Peterson's trial, but also set a legal precedent that has sparked debates in other homicide cases. In effect, Peterson's case reshaped part of the evidentiary landscape, forcing legal experts and policymakers to re-examine the balance between a defendant's rights and the pursuit of justice in cases where direct testimony is unavailable. No true crime case is without controversy, and Drew Peterson's story is no exception. A central point of contention has been the reliance on hearsay evidence, evidence that under normal circumstances would have been deemed inadmissible. Critics argue that the legislative maneuvering behind Drew's law undermines the constitutional right of confrontation, essentially allowing a defendant's fate to be sealed by voices that cannot be cross-examined. Supporters, however, contend that in a case as murky as Peterson's, where crucial witnesses were either deceased or missing, the law was a necessary tool to ensure that all available evidence could be considered. This legal tightrope has fueled debates among legal scholars, with some asserting that the prosecution's case was bolstered by a media-driven rush to judgment, while others maintain that the overwhelming circumstantial evidence made Peterson's guilt inevitable. Amid these controversies, Peterson himself has been a polarizing figure in the media. In interviews and public statements, he has consistently maintained his innocence, arguing that his conviction was the product of a biased investigation and sensationalized media coverage. He has claimed that the public's desire to see a once-respected officer fall from grace led to a narrative that overshadowed the facts. His defiant demeanor, often characterized by a mix of bravado and cold detachment, only deepened the public's fascination with his case, making him a subject of both sympathy and scorn. The intense media coverage of the Peterson case has had a dual effect. On one hand, it has ensured that every detail of his life, from his troubled marriages to the haunting specifics of his wives' fates, is etched into the public memory. On the other, it has sparked a broader conversation about the power of the media in shaping public perception and influencing the justice system. Journalists and commentators have questioned whether the media's relentless pursuit of every sensational detail may have skewed the narrative, turning a complex legal case into a form of modern folklore. This interplay between fact and sensationalism continues to be a topic of discussion among legal experts, media critics, and the public alike. In summary, the media coverage and public perception of Drew Peterson's case are as layered and complex as the man himself. His transformation from a trusted law enforcement officer to a notorious criminal suspect has been magnified by a media environment hungry for scandal and drama. The cultural impact of his story, underscored by numerous documentaries and legal reforms like Drew's Law, has made his case a lasting reference point in true crime history. Yet, amid the debates over hearsay evidence and media sensationalism, one thing remains clear. The story of Drew Peterson will continue to provoke, polarize, and haunt public discourse for years to come. It has left an indelible mark on both the legal system and popular culture, ensuring that his case remains a constant reference point in discussions about domestic violence, evidentiary standards, and the nature of public trust. The repercussions of his actions have extended far beyond his own sentence, influencing legislative reforms, fueling ongoing legal debates, and inspiring a wealth of media portrayals that continue to captivate public attention. One of the most significant legal legacies of the Peterson case is the enactment of what came to be known as Drew's Law in Illinois. This legislation was crafted in response to the unique challenges presented by Peterson's trial, particularly the reliance on hearsay evidence from witnesses who were no longer available to testify, namely, his deceased wife Kathleen Savio and his missing wife Stacy Peterson. Traditionally, hearsay was inadmissible in court because it denied the defendant the right to confront his accusers. However, faced with a case in which direct testimony was impossible, Illinois lawmakers made a controversial decision to modify the rules of evidence. Under Drew's Law, statements made by unavailable witnesses could be admitted if they met stringent reliability criteria. This legal adjustment was not merely a concession to the extraordinary circumstances of one case. It established a precedent that continues to affect how hearsay evidence is treated in homicide and domestic violence trials across the state. Legal scholars and practitioners still debate the implications of this law, with critics arguing that it undermines constitutional rights, while proponents claim it is an essential tool for delivering justice when direct testimony is forever silenced. This legislative ripple effect demonstrates how a single, high-profile case can provoke broad legal reforms that reshape courtroom procedures for years to come. Despite having spent decades behind bars, Drew Peterson has managed to keep his name in the public eye through continuous legal maneuvering. His persistent appeals and post-conviction relief petitions serve not only as his personal crusade for exoneration, but also as a case study in the complexities of the American criminal justice system. Peterson's legal team has raised numerous arguments over the years, from allegations of witness intimidation to claims of prosecutorial misconduct, ensuring that his case remains a fertile ground for discussion among defense attorneys, prosecutors, and legal reform advocates. Peterson's ongoing legal battles underscore the difficulties inherent in balancing a fair trial with public safety in cases of extreme domestic violence and homicide. His case is frequently cited in academic discussions and legal forums as an example of the challenges in proving guilt when a significant portion of the evidence is circumstantial or derived from hearsay. Moreover, it raises uncomfortable questions about how much the media's portrayal of a case can influence judicial outcomes. The intense scrutiny that has accompanied his trials has, for many, become a symbol of the broader issues facing the criminal justice system. Issues such as the treatment of domestic violence, the rights of the accused, and the limits of legal reform. The story of Drew Peterson has transcended the confines of the courtroom to become a cultural phenomenon. His fall from grace, a respected police officer turned convicted murderer, has all the ingredients of modern American folklore. Over the years, his case has been the subject of numerous documentaries, television movies, and true crime series. High-profile dramatizations, including portrayals by actors like Rob Lowe, have reimagined Peterson's life for a broader audience, cementing his status as one of the most notorious examples of a law enforcement officer whose private transgressions starkly contradicted his public persona. This extensive media coverage has not only fed public fascination, but also spurred a wide-ranging cultural debate about the nature of authority and trust. The narrative of a badge-wearing guardian who ultimately betrays the very values he once embodied is one that resonates deeply, prompting discussions about the fallibility of those we idealize. From late-night talk shows to in-depth investigative reports, Peterson's story has become emblematic of a darker side of the American dream, a cautionary tale that warns against placing uncritical trust in figures of authority. Moreover, the case continues to serve as a catalyst for discussions on broader social issues. It has become a reference point in debates on domestic violence, as many advocates point to the recurring patterns of abuse and control evident in Peterson's relationships. The extensive media coverage has ensured that his case is studied not only as a legal anomaly, but also as a societal warning, illustrating how the veneer of respectability can sometimes conceal a deeply troubling reality. Today, Drew Peterson remains a living symbol of a case that refuses to fade from public memory. Despite decades behind bars, his saga continues to evolve, and his story remains a potent reminder of the complexities of the criminal justice system. As of the latest updates, Drew Peterson remains incarcerated. For security reasons, his exact location is undisclosed, though court filings and media reports suggest that he is held in a high-security facility in Indiana. Specifically, records indicate a transfer to the Indiana State Prison in Michigan City. The decision to keep his location confidential underscores not only the potential risks he poses, but also the high-profile nature of his case, which continues to draw intense public and media scrutiny. Peterson has not resigned himself to his fate behind bars. Over the years, he has persistently filed appeals and petitions for post-conviction relief. His legal team argues that several procedural errors during his trial and allegations of prosecutorial misconduct tainted the original proceedings. Each new appeal is a reminder of his relentless effort to overturn or at least mitigate the harshness of his convictions. While these efforts have so far met with limited success, exemplified by the Illinois Supreme Court's decision in September 2017 to uphold his conviction, the continued legal maneuvers ensure that his case remains an ongoing subject of judicial review. In the realm of post-conviction litigation, every filing by Peterson's defense contributes to a broader debate about fairness, evidentiary standards, and the challenges of prosecuting cases where significant portions of the evidence are circumstantial or based on hearsay. Drew Peterson's case has grown to be much more than a singular episode in the annals of true crime. It is now a landmark example that continues to shape public discourse and legal policy. The case has sparked widespread discussions about domestic violence, the admissibility of hearsay evidence, notably through the enactment of Drew's Law, and the intricate balance between a defendant's rights and the interests of justice. Legal scholars, true crime enthusiasts, and reform advocates frequently cite his case as a cautionary tale. It has become a cultural touchstone featured in documentaries, television movies, and numerous media outlets that explore the darker aspects of domestic abuse and institutional failure. The ongoing public interest and the legal debates generated by his case ensure that Drew Peterson's story will be revisited in courtrooms, classrooms, and media reports for years to come. In a world where the line between public service and personal vice can sometimes blur to dangerous extremes, the enduring fascination with Drew Peterson's story serves as a stark reminder that true crime is never just about the individual case. It is a reflection of broader societal issues and a catalyst for legal reform. If you found this deep dive into the legacy and impact of Drew Peterson's case compelling, please like, subscribe, and share this story with others.